Once an ambitious migrant from Poland, Francis Bartek built an empire of steel and concrete in France. Now a widower and millionaire, he lives in Monaco with his 3 children, Philippe, Alexander, and Stella. None of them work, they live off his wealth and are completely spoiled. Alexander skips school to sleep with women of all ages, Stella spends her days shopping, and Philippe invents absurd business ideas while neglecting his duties, preferring to party. They are also extremely rude to the staff. One morning, Philippe comes to Francis's office with a ludicrous idea, hiring people to break in shoes. Francis, who hasn't had the heart to scold them since their mother's death, only says he'll think about it. His business partner and closest friend, Ferruccio, immediately calls it foolish. Philippe leaves after Francis gives him a package, while Ferruccio criticizes Francis for not being stricter, insisting the mother's death is no longer an excuse. 15 years have passed. At the Bartek residence, Stella's birthday party is underway. Her lazy Argentine boyfriend, Juan Carlos, drones on about his homeland while professing love, annoying Stella when she discovers they've run out of juice. She heads to the kitchen to berate the servants but is stopped by Matthias, an old acquaintance now catering the party, who teases her about being glad to see him only because he'll be serving her. Francis lingers in his office, speaking to his late wife's portrait and bristling when the housekeeper, Marguerite, says he's depressed. He steps outside after hearing a commotion, finding Juan Carlos ruining a vintage champagne bottle by trying to open it with a golf ball, then blaming the servant. Soon after, Juan Carlos and Stella ask to speak privately. Francis takes them into his office while cleaning his rifle. He disapproves of Juan Carlos, especially after hearing his intent to marry Stella for money. Stella grows furious, reminding Francis he was always absent. This is not a request but a notice. She then announces her engagement to the party, angering her best friend. Francis receives a call from Ferruccio confirming Philippe never delivered the package but went partying, proven by a viral video. At the same time, Alexander's headmaster arrives. Furious, Alexander skipped class, slept with his wife, and appears with the headmaster's 2 daughters as well. Enraged, the man chases Alexander around the house. Overwhelmed by their simultaneous chaos, Francis suffers a heart attack. He wakes in the hospital with Ferruccio. His children visit, but instead of showing concern, they argue over trivial matters, spiking his heart monitor again. Ferruccio drives them out, asking Francis if he thinks their mother would be proud. 2 months later, the siblings return home panicked. Their credit cards and phones are blocked, Wi-Fi cut. Police raid the house and seize their cars. Suddenly, Francis appears with a rifle, ordering them to flee. They hijack a random car at gunpoint and escape. After they drive off, Ferruccio emerges, paying the driver. On the road to Marseille, Francis explains the company is in trouble. Funds embezzled, accounts frozen, and they're now wanted for fraud. The prime suspect is Ferruccio, missing since the day before. Francis bans them from contacting anyone and discards their phones. In Marseille, they are shocked by the modest lives of the working and middle classes, even more so when Francis takes them to his dilapidated childhood home, with broken lights and shared beds, now their new reality. At dinner, Francis announces they must work to survive. The next morning, he wakes them at 6 to find jobs, while he stays behind to fix the house, since leaving risks recognition. All their lives he fed them, now it's their turn. Even preparing to leave is difficult. Alexander tries at a construction site but steals a worker's lunch and is thrown out. Stella borrows a stranger's phone to call Juan Carlos, draining his credit. Philippe asks a friend to fund his ideas, only to hear they were always jokes. Hours later, Alexander and Philippe return empty-handed, as does Stella, though with a bag of expensive clothes. She had sold Philippe's watch, not for food, but shopping. They argue until Philippe pours detergent on her new clothes. Their fight ends when Marguerite and Matthias arrive, summoned by Stella. Marguerite brings towels, while Matthias offers Stella a job interview at his restaurant. Marguerite tries to give Francis her savings, but he refuses and makes her promise silence. The next day, Stella goes to the restaurant and is hired as a waitress on trial. She struggled a bit to balance the tray and often dropped things by accident, but she was willing to take on dishwashing duties and help clean fish without much complaining. The customers stressed her out, and it took time for her to learn which table was which and to take orders from several people within seconds. Meanwhile, Philippe went to the employment agency. The clerk was shocked to hear that he had no experience or qualifications, yet immediately demanded a senior management position with a high salary and a company car, all paid off the record since he had trouble with the police. After finally persuading him to lower his salary expectations, the clerk gave him a job as a pedicab driver. However, the job was difficult due to his overweight body. Because he pedaled so slowly, all his clients ended up being stolen by a rival driver named Malek. Ferruccio secretly visited Francis and brought expensive wine and lobster. At first, Francis was reluctant to touch it so as not to be unfair to his children, but eventually he gave in and enjoyed the meal. When Francis mentioned that he would be busy repairing the house, Ferruccio wondered aloud whether he was really doing all this just for his children. Suddenly, they heard noises inside the house. They grabbed a rifle and went to investigate, only to find Alexander, who instead of job hunting had been sleeping all day. Francis quickly sent Ferruccio away and tried to clean up the leftover food before his son saw it, but it was too late. Alexander discovered the lobster shells. Quickly searching for an excuse, Francis said he had fished the lobster himself, and Alexander believed him, remarking that nature always provides. At the end of the day, Philippe and Stella brought home a little money, which Francis divided for food and house repairs. When he heard that all Alexander had done was make a hammock and sleep all day, they became angry and refused to have dinner with him. Alexander said he didn't need them and went to forage for acorns, apples, berries, and other fruits from the bushes around the house, but everything he ate only made him sick. The next morning, Francis told Alexander that he could earn his share by helping repair the house. Alexander asked why Francis had never sold the house, since it had been unused before, but Francis only replied that the house had sentimental value. At the restaurant, Stella quarreled with a very rude customer because her dish was missing one ingredient. Upset, she returned to the kitchen to ask for it and almost quit, but Matthias reminded her that she herself used to treat waiters badly, so she shouldn't be surprised if she was treated the same way now. Stella began to open her eyes to reality and decided to keep working with humility. Matthias then showed her how they dealt with rude customers. The cooks spat in their food. After that, Stella began working harder, even cleaning the floor and washing dishes when needed. One night after dinner, the three siblings argued about who should do the dishes, and Philippe accidentally mentioned that Stella used to be anorexic. Francis was shocked to hear this and asked why she hadn't come to him for help, but the children pointed out that he had always been an absent father, missing many important things because of work. Stella had made herself vomit for a year and lost 10 kilos, Alexander had spent a night in jail after being caught with marijuana, and Philippe had spent 2 weeks in the hospital with a burst appendix. Yet their father never visited because he was in Japan and refused to cancel a business trip. They knew that if their mother had been alive, she would not have hesitated to be there. Feeling as though he was on trial, Francis left the room, saying he couldn't be blamed for all their problems. The next day, Philippe finally grew tired of Malek stealing all his clients and confronted him. At first, they argued heatedly and seemed about to fight, but suddenly they discovered a shared hobby, a love of rare sneaker collections. They quickly became friends. Meanwhile, at home, Alexander repaired a water pipe, which impressed Francis. When asked how he knew about this, Alexander admitted that in high school, he and his friends had once rerouted sewage pipes into the principal's bathroom, and because of that, he had spent 2 months studying plumbing tutorials. In Monaco, Juan Carlos slept with Stella's best friend, who told him about the rumors of the Bartek family's financial troubles and who was really behind them. Juan Carlos became suspicious because 2 days earlier he had seen Ferruccio at the country club, so he decided to investigate. Later that day, Francis apologized for his failures as a father, explaining how hard it had been to suddenly become both father and mother, and that they had hidden their mother's illness to protect the children. The three siblings thought their father only saw them as spoiled and stupid, but Francis promised that now he was proud of them. They spent a beautiful evening together, sharing drinks and childhood stories under the stars. The family gradually adapted to their new life, doing housework and repairing the home while enjoying each other's company. Stella grew closer to her colleagues at the restaurant, and Malek taught Philippe how to be a better pedicab driver while teaming up with him to make money from their sneaker collections. Ferruccio called Francis and urged him to end this charade because Juan Carlos had started snooping, but it was too late. Juan Carlos showed up at the house a few hours later, revealing that he had uncovered Francis's deception by following Ferruccio. Francis offers Juan Carlos money to leave, but he refuses, pretending he saved the family by selling his properties. Francis hides the truth and returns to Monaco, where Juan Carlos pushes to marry Stella. When Francis prepares to confess, Juan Carlos rushes her to elope. At City Hall, Francis and his sons arrive just as Stella learns Juan Carlos' real name is Kevin. Francis exposes him as a fraud and admits the family's ruin was staged. Betrayed, Stella slaps Juan Carlos and cuts ties with her father. 9 months later, the siblings thrive on their own. Philippe sells trainers, Alexander is a plumber, and Stella opens a restaurant with Matthias. When Francis visits with flowers, they first turn cold, but guilt leads them to call him back, reuniting the family, and with that the story ends here.